Good evening. Welcome to those here in attendance and online to the February 13th, 2025 meeting this Thursday evening of the Johnson City City Commission held at the Water and Sewer Services Complex. It's currently 6:01 p.m. and we will call the meeting to order. New gavel. Pastor Ethan Magnus with First Christian Church will give our invocation. So if everyone will please stand and remain standing for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let's pray together. Sovereign God, we borrow the words of your scripture for our prayer tonight. God, you are for us. Who can possibly stand against us? God, you have made us and called us righteous. Who is left to condemn us? God, you have declared that we are loved. Who shall separate us from that love? And so, God, trusting in your providence, your righteousness, and your love, we ask your care on our city, on our commission, and on this meeting. As always, we remember first and ask God that you would be with the vulnerable and the hurting and the desperate and the hungry and the lost and the confused and the sick and the dying. May we never be so blind by our own busyness that we forget these vulnerable you have called us to love. And you have called us. You have called the powerful to use their power with compassion. You have called the wealthy to generosity. You have called the whole to the work of healing. And you have called all of us to the work of love. And so with great humility, we pray as a recipient of that calling, may you accomplish your love and compassion and healing and generosity through us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Ball?
Yes, the first order of business is item 3.1. This is to consider approval of the minutes for the regularly scheduled City Commission meeting held on Thursday, February the 6th, 2025.
Are there any comments, corrections, or motion?
Move for approval.
I'll second.
Ms. Laus?
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Cox?
Yes.
Mayor Hunter?
Yes.
Mayor, we have 5 individuals signed up for public for public comment on the agenda.
Before we get started, I do want to make it aware that microphone that we did receive several emails yesterday and today, some of which were from people who wanted to speak but didn't unfortunately make the cutoff, but we did receive your emails, so we appreciate that input. And then for those who are going to speak, public comment is limited to those who have signed up at least 12 hours in advance. Comments must be about an actionable item on the agenda, and you've got 3 minutes that Ms. Summers will keep track of to make your comments. And as you come up, if you would state your name and address. Who's the first?
Chris Edwards is listed first on the agenda.
Good evening. Chris Edwards, Johnson City, 415 West Pine Street. My topic tonight is the settlement for the Jane Doe, Sean Williams case.
Can you pull your microphone a little bit closer, Chris?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Better?
Yes.
Awesome. First, I definitely empathize with the situation you're in. I can't imagine that 60 victims deserve justice. The people that put you in office are idly sitting by, seeing that if you're up to the task. And most of Johnson City just wants to put these dark days behind us. Personally, I do not oppose legal settlements. However, I caution settlements under seal and settlements that do not offer an admission of guilt, because in my opinion, they're designed to do one thing and one thing only: hide the truth from the public. And to be honest and fair, it will be the public that carries the burden of any such settlement. As a taxpayer, I am not privy to the language, nor would I be afforded a city attorney to help me with the legalese to understand the ramifications of the documents that you've read. So what I can do as a citizen is ask you two things tonight. One, if there is any language in that settlement that provides protection for an individual that has been listed as a defendant in either the Jane Doe case or any Sean Williams cases, that you decline. Have those people go to court, face their accusers, and let justice prevail. Second, if there is no language in that settlement that doesn't target, address, and try to abolish outdated employee protections within the city, I ask you to reject the settlement. An outdated employee protection, in my opinion, would be somebody who has been named as a defendant, has been given protection under seal, is legally no longer bound to stand in front of their accuser, yet still retain their retirement or their health benefits. Because again, that's a secondary burden for the taxpayers. Tonight, you have the ability to set a positive precedent, one that will show the country we're not backwoods, protect our own Johnson Cityans, but rather we have drawn a line in the sand, and we're teaching current and future employees that if you do wrong, you will be held accountable. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Ms. Ball?
Gail Honeycutt?
Ms. Honeycutt?
Brought me some paperwork, if I could hand it to you. Would that be okay?
What is it?
I brought with me some paperwork, if I could hand it to you, is that
Could
okay?
you
Sure.
give it to JT?
JT?
JT.
And when you get to 1 minute, I'll put my finger up so that you'll know that you've got 1 minute left. I forgot to do that with.
I actually did, I will trade with you. Hello, my name is Abigail Lincoln.
And your address?
I'm sorry,
Your address?
my address is 115 Beechnut Street, Johnson City, Tennessee.
Thank you. You can go ahead.
I was born in Eastern Tennessee. Every statistic that exists would have landed me in prison on fentanyl, in housing projects, and as a single mother. I began working in bars and restaurants when I was 18 years old. I am now today in the top 8% of earners in Johnson City, Tennessee. I own 2 homes. I am educated, and I am a productive member of society because of my employment in the bar scene. I have been devoted to this area for 18 years of my adult life I have spent in downtown Johnson City. I have no faith. I spend most of my Saturday nights at a bar, and I spend most of my Sunday mornings with my daddy at a Baptist church. I respect all walks of life, and I believe in very few things in this world, except for that some of the last of the angels that walk God's green earth are working in diners and behind bars, and that they do far more for social services than does our state, our city, or any maneuver. But I come to you today not to discuss my faith, my politics, my poetry. I come to you to ask you some questions about the legal structure and the way this resolution is written. So my first question is, have you done a cost analysis on how much it will cost the city itself in a reduction of liquor and beer taxes relative to the hours that are suggested being changed? And I would like for you to raise your hand if the answer is yes.
We don't engage. This is
Okay.
your time to communicate to us. Thank you.
I think that that's a valid question, but if you don't wish to answer it, I completely understand. If you look at page 2 of my report, I would ask you a similar question. Have you run or had measured any metrics and statistics relative to the crime rate as it exists with the bar crowd or as it exists with the rest of the population downtown, cite specifically to our homeless communities? You're not going to answer, I respect that. I would point you to page 2 of the document I sent you, which is a metric produced by the state of Tennessee. It points to the timing.
Thank you. We'll review this. And feel free to email if you have more.
Oh,
that
I
you'd like to
absolutely
share.
will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mayor, our next speaker is Thomas Breeze.
Same thing, name and address, and I'll give you a 1-minute warning.
Thomas Breeze, address 1223 South Buffalo Street. I'm owner of Capone's downtown. I'd like to speak about this resolution that seemingly popped up out of nowhere. Although it does not explicitly state this, it is my understanding that the ultimate goal is to limit on-premise alcohol sales to 1 a.m. This path can, as I see it, go two directions, neither of which is good. Direction one is a paradigm shift in which the late business starts and ends 2 hours earlier, which would require all the same services, just at a different time of day. The downside to this is it would upset the balance that currently exists. Currently, the dinner and late dinner crowds come downtown around 5:30 to 6. That crowd starts thinning out around 10:30, 11. Starting around 11:30, the late night crowd starts arriving. If this shift takes place, two crowds will be competing for valuable parking. The businesses that depend on these patrons will suffer. Downtown will suffer, and Johnson City will suffer in the form of considerable lost revenue. The other direction this could go is even worse. The late night business could dry up and wither away altogether. Downtown hosts thousands of guests every weekend, much more than the stated 2% of Johnson City residents referenced in the resolutions. These guests do spend money downtown, but more than that, they spend all over Johnson City, and many of them travel here from surrounding areas just for the nightlife. I have personally seen tourists as far as Canada to see shows like Luke Combs, Brantley Gilbert, and Chris Stapleton at our establishment. Unfortunately, we cannot survive on shows like that alone and depend on the week-to-week business to make ends meet. The rule change would threaten that, not just for our business, but all of us that this rule change will affect. Approximately 70% of our sales are made between the hours of 12:30 and 2:30. Some of you own businesses or have in the past. No business can survive a 70% cut in cash flow.
1 minute.
Are there problems that need to be addressed? Yes, obviously. Can they be addressed in a less destructive way? Yes, obviously. I, for one, am confident, and the other owners of on-premises licenses would agree that all of us would be ready, willing, and eager to work with the police department and city management to address these issues. Other cities like Nashville, Knoxville, and Chattanooga have found a way to make this work. Are they smarter than us, more capable than us? I don't think they are. The bottom line is that if we put our heads together, we can address these issues without shutting down businesses, costing people their jobs, or costing the city and state much-needed revenue. Bottom line is I do not think we should upend the apple cart to address a handful of worms. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Paul?
Mayor, the next speaker is Ashton Smith.
Name and address.
Ashton Smith. My home address is 508 Stanley Avenue, Johnson City, Tennessee. Thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to speak today. I own the laboratory located at 108 Tipton Street in the heart of our vibrant downtown. While I do not sell alcohol, the success of my business is directly tied to the lively nightlife that our bars and clubs provide. Solely because we have these establishments, I'm able to keep my business open until 3 a.m. Today, I stand here to express my strong opposition to the proposed regulation that would limit alcohol service hours from the state-mandated 3 a.m. to the proposed 1 a.m. First and foremost, I want to emphasize the significant economic impact this proposal would have on our community. The 2 hours between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. are not just minor details. For many businesses, including my own, that time frame represents our highest sales period. By limiting alcohol services, we're not just hurting bars and nightclubs, we're risking the livelihoods of countless employees and the sustainability of local businesses. If my store, which does not serve alcohol, could face a revenue loss of over $6,500 a month in just those 2 hours, imagine the potential losses for bars, restaurants, and other establishments that rely on late-night customers. Collectively, we could be looking at hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars lost annually for the Johnson City economy. Moreover, other cities in the Tri-Cities area, such as Bristol and Kingsport, allow alcohol sales until 3 a.m. Why would Johnson City choose to lag behind and lose business to bars and clubs in other cities, or even the Bristol Casino, which would almost definitely increase the risk of driving under the influence between Johnson City and these other areas? We have a thriving nightlife scene, and it's essential that we capitalize on this asset rather than restrict it. Our city has the potential to be a leader in providing an enjoyable and safe nightlife experience, and this proposal would only serve to stifle that potential. I understand the concerns surrounding law enforcement and safety. However, I firmly believe that regulated environments such as bars and clubs are inherently safer than uncontrolled parties or gatherings. When people are cut off at a bar, they are more likely to make responsible decisions. In contrast, uncontrolled environments often lead to excessive drinking, risky behavior, and underage consumption. By allowing our nightlife to thrive within regulated premises, we can create a safer atmosphere for everyone. Additionally, we must consider the employees who work in our bars, clubs, late-night restaurants, and businesses such as my own. In a challenging economic climate, we cannot afford to lose any more jobs or hours for these service workers. In conclusion, I urge you to reconsider this proposal. Our city has built a reputation for its vibrant nightlife, and we should strive to enhance that rather than restrict it. By allowing alcohol service until 3 a.m., we not only support local businesses, but also ensure a safer, more enjoyable environment for our community. Let's work together to maintain Johnson City's position as a leader in nightlife and economic growth. And also, I'd like to say off of my script here, I'm 24 years old, and I own successful businesses across Tennessee, including in Knoxville, Johnson City, Kingsport, Murfreesboro. Johnson City is the best one by far. It's because of our late-night crowd.
Thank you.
Thank
Ashton.
you.
Mayor, our final speaker is Jed Clark.
Is Jed Clark in attendance?
Mayor, this might be a good time to remind the folks who are here, this is just a resolution. If this comes back on our agenda at another time, there's plenty of time for public input at that time as well.
Jed Clark? Okay. Ms. Ball?
Commission, the next order of business is consideration of the consent agenda.
I will start to my right. Commissioner Fowler?
I have nothing.
Vice Mayor?
Nothing to pull.
Commissioner Wise?
I would just pull 5.2.1 so that we could just make the public aware of what's happening there.
Okay. And Commissioner
And
Brock?
that was mine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so-
Ms. Ball, 5.2.
Yes, 5.2.1, and I would ask April Norris if she would come forward. This is an item about baseline sports construction and the Metro Kiwanis tennis courts, pickleball courts.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm April Norris, your Parks and Recreation Director. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to explain how we're moving along with the progress there and to explain our change order. Our Public Works team has been working diligently out there. We ran into some electrical issues moving some of the lighting, which has added a little bit of time to that. We've had some laser grading issues that need to be done out there just to kind of clear up some of those bird baths to complete that. So that's a little bit of what this change order is just to complete out that final base of stone. And there's some additional areas of asphalt that need to be done. We did get a $27,000 credit towards this to changes with the fencing, so that did help us out with this. So that's what we're looking at with this change request.
Before the project, we had how many tennis courts?
5.
And how many will we have after?
We're putting back the exact 5 that we have, but we are adding 8 pickleball courts in this project. So to be able to accomplish that at the cost that we have is really amazing, because otherwise this is probably closer to a $2 million project versus the I think we're at 485 now.
So 5 tennis courts, and you said 8?
5 tennis courts and 8 pickleball courts.
Thank you.
And when do you think they'll go into commission?
So with this now, with this kind of setback that we've had with that, that's the push to get that on the agenda tonight, was so that we could go ahead and start the work. Hopefully, we'll be playing on those pickleball courts by the first part of May.
Great.
And are these lighted pickleball courts, or are they going to be daytime?
That's been our struggle there, is to get the electrical kind of moved around, because the way that we push those 8 pickleball courts back out, we graded out some land to make those. So there were already existing lights there, so we kind of had to move those. So yes, there will be lights on these courts, so.
Great, thank you.
Great. Any other questions?
I would move
entertain-
approval on the consent agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Laus?
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Cox?
Yes.
Mayor Hunter?
Yes.
Commission, the next order of business is the consideration of ordinance 6.1. This is the second reading and public hearing. It's an ordinance providing for the conveyance of real property owned by the City of Johnson City, Tennessee. In addition, there is included in its conveyance an adjacent property, non-exclusive right-of-way easement located in the 9th Civil District of Washington County, Tennessee, to the Johnson City Energy Authority upon the terms and conditions contained herein, and repealing all ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Randy Trivett, the Deputy City Manager. This request came from the Johnson City Power Board, or Bright Ridge. Back in early years of 2017, the Johnson City Power Board broke off and became their own authority. And when they did that, the city transferred property of their substations and anything associated with the power board and conveyed that property to them. Well, the West Primary Substation, which is located off of Novice Drive, was conveyed to them in 2017. But the driveway that comes off of Novice Drive, it's about 1/2 acre, and it's a paved driveway that they use to access that, was inadvertently left off of that conveyance. And so they've asked that we convey that 1/2 acre to them to tie it into their existing substation so that they would have permanent access to their substation. Along with that, there's a very steep bank that comes up off of that driveway that gets up to some city-owned property. They've asked for an easement on that upper part of that bank so that they can access their transmission lines back at the railroad tracks. And that easement would stay with the city ownership, but it would allow them to go in and out so that they could service those transmission lines. Staff recommends approval, and this is second reading and would require a public hearing.
I will open the public hearing. I know we have several new possibly first-time visitors to commission meetings, but public hearing is different than public comment. This is specific to this item. So if anybody's in favor or opposed or have comments regarding this issue, this is your time to come speak. Okay, get used to this thing. Seeing nobody coming forward, we'll close public hearing.
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second?
Ms. Laus?
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Cox?
Yes.
Mayor Hunter?
Yes. Ms. Ball?
Yes, Mayor. The next item is under Other. It's item 7.1, and this is to consider a resolution defining Johnson City's support and intent for public chapter number 498, known as the Regional Retail Tourism Development District Act. And if I may be excused to go down
Yes,
to the
ma'am.
podium and to present this. Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayors, and members of the commission. As you all are aware, thank you. As you all are aware, I'm going to provide you with a history of the work the city has done on this, as well as the General Assembly. There are key legislative actions that have occurred in this area, and later on I'll show you the map that this includes. But there was a House bill that's listed up here, and then it was passed as the Regional Retail Tourism Development District Act. It was passed in the 107 General Assembly effective July 1, 2019. As a part of that, the City of Johnson City was to develop an ordinance that established that district. That district had some constraints around it. It was passed on January the 16th, 2020. And in just a little bit, I'll talk a little bit about how that boundary was defined and how it was established and what the purpose of that was. But this kind of gives you an outline of how all the establishment of that happened. The purpose of the district was to create an area that would be incentivized through some state tax dollars that would help incentivize development, retail development, entertainment within that district, so that there could be some activity happen at that intersection. In accordance with that, there was boundaries that were established. There was specific requirements of those boundaries that related to the distance from the interstate and from the Boones Creek exit, or from the area in there. As a total of that whole boundary that the commission adopted at that time, it included 937 acres. This was a law that was put into place, didn't specifically call it an area, but this Boones Creek exit is the one that fit into that criteria. This is a map of the area that was adopted and established at that date in January of 2020. So it has been in place. And since that time, the city has been working with the state, the Commissioner of Revenue, on a way to get that certified as this retail and entertainment district. And essentially what it does is establish this law that allows the city to work with developers within the area and also use some of the money, the state sales tax dollars, to be able to make infrastructure improvements within that district. What you're seeing on this map, there's several things. There's a fire station that's within this area. The area that you see in red is already developed. So there are several things. This is the exit that has the Cracker Barrel, has some other things in it. The area that you see in yellow that is hatched is already in the city limits. And then there's some area that you see in yellow that's not hatched, that is not in the city limits. So it's kind of made up of the whole area. The blue line is the district, and that was, in the prior slide, that was defined as the 1/2 mile from the center of where Boones Creek, the Boones Creek intersection and I-26 came together. Any parcel that intersected that became a part of the district. So you see some of those yellow parcels that fall outside the blue line, they're also included within that district. This area has been reviewed by the Commerce, the Commissioner of Revenue, and has been approved. So the intent of this resolution is for us to move forward with the state. We have asked the state to certify this area, and we are putting forth a resolution to let the state know the intent of how we wish and what you all would wish that this money would be used for. So the money is allowed to be used for, and it's approximately, what it is, 5 cents of what the state receives in sales tax, 75% of that can be used to incentivize extraordinary retail and entertainment, and then also to be able to make improvements to that area within the district, such as water line improvements, utility improvements, roadway improvements, so that it doesn't get improved and we don't see things at the cost of our current taxpayers. So the intent, again, as I said, it's a reimbursement agreement, so the city would be responsible for upfronting the money. And so that's a consideration that you would have to consider tonight in this resolution in order to prove to the state. So again, it would be used for right-of-way easement acquisition. It could be used to develop parks, plazas, other kinds of areas, any kind of necessary public improvements in that area. It could be used as incentives. Again, we talked about if there's an extraordinary development that comes in that really we see as adding value. The life of this is 20 years with the reimbursement occurring over a 30-year period. So it really speaks to and says that we would recommend as staff, and if you adopt this resolution, that we would only pass along this incentive directly to developers that meet this criteria of really incentivizing other development and being extraordinary in nature and being transformational. So it wouldn't be passed along to something that may already be in Johnson City or something that may already be here and we may just be a duplication of something that's already occurring. But it would bring new folks to town and bring new dollars to the city. The development agreement. So as a part of the agreement, the first part of this is that the state has to certify the district. That has not happened yet. We have requested that. We requested it 2 weeks ago. If you approve this, we would provide this resolution to the state. Once that is approved, then for each of the developments that come in that meet this criteria of being an extraordinary retail or entertainment type development, we would do a development agreement. And in that development agreement, we would specifically say how we would incentivize that. And each of those development agreements would need to come before the commission. It would be held in a public meeting. The public would be able to evaluate the benefit to the city. And so there would be an opportunity for public comment on that. But again, the intent is to what we call a but-for test. We would not be able to get this kind of development in town without this incentive. So we're looking for types of things that would draw people in, and we would be able to generate revenue in years to come to help bring tax dollars into this community to kind of lower our tax rate, our property tax rate, to keep tax rate lower within this community. That is the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I will note that our Deputy City Manager, Randy Trivett, did all the work on this, and I'm taking the credit for standing up here with the presentation, but he did the heavy lifting on it, and I just wanted to say thank you to him.
Absolutely. Commissioners, any questions or comments?
Part of this resolution, I know there were restrictions on this, and one of those is whatever we bring in, we need to get 1 million visitors per year with what we're bringing in for this to be viable for us, and that's part of the restriction that we have to meet.
So part of the restriction to initially be certified is that you have to meet 3 criteria. One of those is the number of visitors, the amount of money that you spend, and the amount of capital that's put into the project. That gets the certification. That's a one-time thing that happens at the state. Once that happens the first time, and we have presented that project to the Commissioner of Revenue, and he is working with the Commissioner of the ECD in Nashville, that is for the one project that gets it certified. The other projects that we would have development agreements don't necessarily have to meet that same threshold. It is just for that first development that comes in. So we have provided them with a project that meets that. They're evaluating it to determine, to review it and evaluate whether or not it meets that threshold. But the other ones could potentially not have to meet that level of threshold, but would still need to be extraordinary.
And just to clarify, I mean, the incentive is about 75% of the state's portion of the sales tax. So it's not money that we're getting in the first place. It's money the state's giving.
It is
And they're-
up to 75%. So it could work out that we would have a development that would come in, or a type of business that would come in, that we would evaluate it and say, we don't think it needs to be at that full level. You know, maybe it's something that we would do an analysis on return on investment and say we feel like it only needs to be, 3% of that amount or 3 cents. Then we may not do the full amount because it doesn't generate that kind of revenue coming into the city. So, but that's the maximum amount we would be able to do. So it sets up the terms of the agreement to be that maximum amount. Does that make sense and answer your question?
It's, so for the state, Commissioner of Revenue, they're getting one chance to kind of bless this, and what they're really wanting to see is some assurances from the local government that we're not going to be indiscriminate in our use of their prospective revenue.
That is exactly right. They only have one opportunity to certify it, and once they certify it, they really, I mean, we want to be good partners with them. We want to demonstrate that we are using, even though it's state tax dollars, sales tax dollars, we're using it wisely. This was not a part of their laid out process. We offered up doing a resolution so that we could demonstrate to them that that our intent, or that your intent, was that you wanted to use it wisely, and that we were laying this out for future commissions to consider as projects came before you. And so you're exactly right, Commissioner Wise. This is an intent for us to demonstrate to them that we are using this money wisely.
This may be a good time, and I liked your question, Commissioner Cox. So a lot of people may not know how our sales tax is distributed. And so at 9.5 cents, the state gets 7 cents of that. And the local area gets to keep 2.5% to do everything we need to do with schools and fire and police and help funding our budget. So what they're proposing is they would give back 5% of their 7 cents that we send to them. And so that would be the basis for that incentive. Okay.
With just one small correction, I think it's 5 cents, and it's 75%. 75% of that 5 cents.
Okay.
So it is a big deal to them, and it's for 20 years. Again, I would just repeat that the money has to be spent within the district, or it gets returned to the state. But the remaining part, Commissioner Brock, we get to keep forever. So the other 2.5% that we get, or 2 cents that we get, 2.5 cents, we get to keep forever.
All right. Very good.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second. Ms. Laus?
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Cox?
Yes.
Mayor Hunter?
Yes. Ms. Ball?
Mayor, the next item on the agenda is a consideration of approval of a resolution authorizing Johnson City to regulate hours of sale for alcoholic beverages. This is a resolution in support of state legislation granting authority to Johnson City to regulate hours of alcohol sales. I'm going to take this one slowly. You've heard some folks comment on this. I want to make sure, I think we are aware that there's a lot of information. There's a change.org, so we're aware of that. We want to try to clarify some of that as we do the presentation and make sure that we answer all of your questions when we do this tonight. So I know this may be a little bit long, and I would just want to make sure that we get all the information out. So currently, state law says that you can sell beer up until 12 o'clock. So that's all across the state, you can sell beer. If you hold an alcohol license to sell liquor, and you can sell it till 3 a.m. If you hold that license to sell liquor till 3, you can also sell beer till 3. So they kind of come together. And that's a state law. Sorry about that. And that is with the exception of very few places that have regulations that allow for something different. What we're asking is consideration of our legislative our General Assembly to allow the City of Johnson City to regulate the hours of alcohol sales within the City of Johnson City. So all that we're saying to them is we would like the ability for the City Commission to be able to establish the hours that alcohol is sold within the City of Johnson City. And we wanted to, in presenting this, tell you a couple of things. We have done some research, we've looked at data, and I think some of the questions that were asked before we will be able to answer now in this presentation. So we're happy we're able to do that. The biggest reason is it's based on safety and the well-being of the community. And we hope that our last slide really wraps up the total reason that we're asking for this. So as we did this, we really wanted to come out with the factual information about this. We took a look at the last 5 years, and we looked particularly at downtown, and we looked at the hours between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. And particularly this is around crime. And we really looked at 3 major types of crime, the blue being DUIs, the yellow being weapons and drugs, and the red being violent crimes. And of course, violent crimes are those crimes that includes crimes against people. And those worst case would be murder. And as you can see, and as this graph demonstrates, over those past 5 years, I would point out that those past 5 years, as everybody already knows, included years of COVID, which limited folks from going out. So this is probably an underreporting of people being out. The hours of 1 to 4 a.m. had the highest number of incidents where we saw those types of crimes occur. So as you can see, we're looking at this from a safety standpoint, and we're looking at the number of violent crimes that occur during that time. This is what we call a heat map. On the left side, you see the same information that was presented on the column before. So on the left side, you see the same thing. The blue represents driving under the influence. The yellow represents weapons and drugs, and the red represents violent crime. The heat map, we have identified the downtown areas being the black line shown on the map. So you have, we'd call this a heat map. So where you see the most intensity, you see the yellow area, that's where you see the most activity occur around crime. So the map, you know, the thing we love about using the data is it kind of speaks for itself. You can see that we have the most activity occur within that area where you see the highest level of the heat map showing up. So in identifying that, you know, that's the reason we felt compelled to come to you or to ask for the resolution. Again, this does not mean if you take action tonight that this happens. There are a lot of other steps that have to happen in order for this to become a law. And a lot of other opportunities that I think Commissioner Brock brought out for there to be community input on this. At the bottom, you see the number of establishments and when they stop selling alcohol. You can, and I'm sorry if the audience can't see this, but you can see that currently we have, according to our information, 7 establishments that sell alcohol till 3 a.m. Now, in contrast, when we were looking at this is, of course, when people look at this is the city of Johnson City, geographically. If you look at this map, you also see the yellow area, which we showed the boundaries of downtown. The yellow area shows the downtown boundary, and it shows it being 1.4% geographically of the whole city of Johnson City, which is approximately 44 acres, or 44 square miles, excuse me. When you look at how our resources are used and how we utilize our resources, particularly on the weekend, the next map and the black dots show resources of our police department. So when you take a look at the contrasting map that I'm going to go back to, and you see the area in blue, and then you see the next map, you see the next map that show where we put our resources on the weekend, you see the number of resources that we dedicate to downtown because of the number of crimes that we have occurring downtown during that time. And so what this demonstrates to us is we're not distributing our resources of police officers across the whole city and to all of our community in an even way. So if there is a crime that happens in Gray, if there's a crime that happens in South Johnson City, then we're not able to respond as quickly as we would like to. We also know that the cost of being able, I think there was one question about the cost of the sales. The cost of providing those resources in downtown is significant on weekends, especially weekends where we have a high traffic area downtown. We contrasted this also because we felt like it was important from a data standpoint to look at other areas in Johnson City. So we looked at other areas where there were places that had bars or other places of establishments that were open to 3 that sold alcohol. In comparison, North Rhone Street, same map that you saw before, you see a little bit different trend. And a lot of this trend is because you don't have these establishments congregated in the same area. So you don't see the same type of thing happen. This is North Rhone Street. Again, a heat map shows it distributed differently. You don't see the number of violent crimes within that same time period. That's just giving a contrast with what we see. This resolution, again, what it does, and all it does, is it formalizes the support of this commission to go to our legislative body and ask that the city of Johnson City have control over the sale of alcohol, the hours of the sale of alcohol. What it does not do, it does not immediately change when the sale of alcohol happens. It is not a law that puts into action right now that alcohol sales change at all. It does not target a specific area, geographic area within the city, and it does not dictate closing times for any business. So it does not say it dictates potentially if the legislation is passed, potentially when alcohol, but it does not say when a business has to close if it is approved. If approved, and this would be sometime before it could be approved, we would move forward with sharing it with our legislative body. Bill language would have to be approved at the state level and considered by our General Assembly. So it would have to go to a state level to be considered. And the next steps would be determined based on the final legislation, the wording of that final legislation. And the key takeaways are this. And if people say, why are we doing this? Why would we come before you as a staff and ask for this? We want a vibrant community, not only where people can work and play, but also reside. We want there to be a balance downtown between businesses succeed and we have a strong residential community downtown or in the whole city. This is just one tool of trying to develop a comprehensive approach to making our city safer. We have been talking with our stakeholders, and we'll continue to talk to our stakeholders. I think we had one gentleman who wants to continue to have a dialogue around safety. We are extremely open to that. We've had several meetings with stakeholders about ways of making it safer downtown, and we will be open to that as we continue to move through this process. The current situation depletes our police department's efforts in other areas of the city. And we are very concerned that we could have activity occur in other parts of our cities that could be very concerning. The end goal is to have a safe and thriving community. That is the completion of my presentation.
Commissioners, any questions for staff?
Kathy, you mentioned that there's just an extra cost of the patrol on weekends. And I mean, is there kind of a study that's been done at all yet to see kind of what the extra cost could be for a night on a Saturday night or?
I think the last numbers that I heard, and the police our command staff does a great job of trying to evaluate which weekends there will be more activity downtown. They look at trends, they look at the weather, they look at what's happening. And so on a weekend that is very thriving and there are a lot of things going on, there could be as much as $7,000 to $8,000 spent downtown on patrol. That's not every weekend, I don't think, but on several weekends, we could be spending $7,000 to $8,000 to add extra patrol downtown. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, Gibson. Great.
This resolution will go back to Nashville, is that correct, to our legislators to look at, to see if they actually want to carry a bill or to move it forward from there? That's the purpose of this, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. There is a bill that has been introduced in the legislation, and this resolution will go along with it because they want to see that you all support it before they continue to look at it and move forward. So it will move forward. It will be given as part of that.
Any other questions? I guess I've got a question. As I was looking into it, it seemed like Tennessee had a fairly liberal last call of 3 a.m. compared to all the states that surround us. Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Alabama, and Arkansas all have last call laws with a late cutoff of 2 a.m. Georgia, 11:45, Kentucky, and Mississippi, midnight. I think there was a question in public comment about the effect, or have we done any research as to how would this, if there was a reduction in sale of alcohol hours, is there an economic impact? Or, and you may not have that answer, I'm just asking.
I don't have the answer to that. We know that if this continues along with the state, there is a financial requirement that we evaluate that in some way. We don't have an answer to that right now.
Okay.
And to be clear, the resolution we're passing is seeking supporting legislation in Nashville that would give a local city commission the authority to adopt those policies. The local city commission wouldn't have to adopt those policies if the community could find alternative ways to perhaps address some of the crime concerns. All we're adding is a tool to the toolbox. We're not restricting the hours of sale in supporting this resolution. Is that?
That's correct. It would just give the authority to the city commission to decide.
I think several of our emails that we received had a 1 o'clock cutoff. I've not seen that. Is that assumption, just for clarification, is that anywhere in this resolution a set time of alcohol sale of 1, 2, or any time?
I don't think it is. I think that may be coming from the data that we showed that the higher crime rate being from 1 to 4.
Gotcha. Any other questions or comments, or is there a motion?
I'll move to approve the resolution.
Second. Okay. Ms. Laus?
Is there any?
Yes.
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 I mean, and just for clarification, for discussion, is just, I think it's important to look at all the tools of the toolbox that we could have. I think I've gotten a lot of feedback from the city on both perspectives since this got passed, and I just want to make it clear too that this is by no means, I think there'll be a lot more conversation. I think one of the guys that stood up and talked from Capone's, Tommy, and just mentioned, hey, get together with police and see what we could do and have time for public comment. I think this is us supporting the conversation, but it also doesn't stop anybody from getting ahead of this now and getting out there and seeing what we can do to keep downtown getting safer and safer and change the trend line too. So just, that opportunity can be out there too. So, but I vote in favor of it, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Yes. Ms. Ball.
Yes, Commission, the last order of business is item 7.3. This is to consider approval of the settlement proposal in BP et al. Versus the City of Johnson City. I will call on our city attorney, Tom Seeley, for this item.
Good evening, Ms. Ball, Ms. Laus, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Commissioners. Tom Seeley, the city attorney. Tonight, we have before the commission the proposed settlement in the BP et al. Versus the City of Johnson City matter. This litigation's been going on for several years, and you've had the opportunity to meet with the team of attorneys who's representing the city in executive session numerous times. In those executive sessions, you've been able to receive status updates on the litigation and also receive legal advice from your attorneys. And I just would ask and caution the commission tonight that, we do have attorney-client privilege in those executive sessions. So we do not want to discuss or ask questions regarding the legal advice that you received in those executive sessions. So I would ask that our lead attorney in this class action litigation, John Lakey, is going to come and present the proposed settlement to the commission for your consideration.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Commissioners. Thanks for having me before you tonight to talk about this very complicated and difficult issue, I know, for all of you and for Johnson City. The BP case you all have lived with for quite a while. It was a very extensive suit brought against the City of Johnson City and individual Johnson City police officers. In essence, there's really two parts of that lawsuit. One was a purported class action against the city, alleging that various types of sexual crimes to women were reported to the police department over a 5-year period from January 1, 2018 to December 31, 22, and that those weren't investigated appropriately according to the allegations because of gender discrimination. So that's one side of the lawsuit. That's a purported class action involving up to 400 different women for that period of basically 5 years, again, ending in December of 22. The second part of the BP lawsuit, again, was a purported class action against the city, as well as individual police officers related to sexual assaults that were committed by Sean Williams through approximately the end of 2021. And allegations that the city and the officers were liable to those women under a number of theories, both under state law and under federal law. The lawsuit seeks extensive damages against Johnson City, including damages for compensatory, which is physical injuries, emotional injuries, medical bills, etc. In addition, each of the two sides of that lawsuit seek attorney's fees on behalf of the plaintiffs. These plaintiffs are represented by attorneys from two different firms in California, as well as a firm in Middle Tennessee. The attorney's fees that would be offered if they were able to prevail would be extensive. I don't know the exact amount that the attorneys would put in front of the court, but I would expect they would exceed $600–700 an hour. And finally, the lawsuit seeks punitive damages against Johnson City as well as the individual officers. Punitive damages are unrelated to actual damages. Punitive damages are, in essence, to punish conduct, and can be very extensive in a case like this if they were found to be warranted. So here this evening, after extensive negotiations, there is a settlement to present to this body for consideration. And it's never easy to decide whether a case should be settled. Even though there are strong legal positions to take in defense of a case, there can be various reasons why a city or any defendant settles a case. And so what I want to do is present to you really the primary terms of the settlement for you to consider. And certainly glad to, ask any questions, again, not delving into legal advice. So if the settlement is agreed to by this body, there would be immediate motion by the plaintiffs for dismissal with prejudice of all claims related to the Sean Williams portion of this case. That is, the victims of Sean Williams, the two lead plaintiffs, would move to dismiss the case with prejudice. And with prejudice, what that means, just for I'm used to the term, but just for anyone not, it means that it would be a case that was dismissed and could not be brought back. In those situations, the court dismisses a case called with prejudice. In addition, there would be full and complete releases provided by those plaintiffs and the class plaintiffs for the other part of the case to the city and its employees and former employees. So with regard to the second side of the case, which is the case involving the claims against Johnson City related from January 1, 2018 to December 31, 22, based on an allegation of bias by a purported class that would number around 400. The definition of that class, and just so that I don't muck it up as I tell you, is all women, including minors, who reported sexual abuse or trafficking by any person to JCPD from January 1, 2018 to December 31, 22. Again, based on discovery, it appears that that class could be as large as 400 persons. That part of any agreement, even if approved by this court, by this body today, would have to be approved by the federal district court. So why do cities and why do defendants enter into settlements? One thing is it eliminates the uncertainty of litigation. Litigation is by far the worst way to sometimes resolve issues and come to what some people might think is the ultimate truth. There's risk of high judgments, there's risk of inconsistent decisions. Here in this case, because of the nature of the case, because it's a class case, there's the length of this litigation already has been long, and it promises only to be longer. There's potential for multiple trials in Chattanooga. And because of that, there's a intended disruption to the city, to the Johnson City Police Department, its officers, and most importantly to the citizens of Johnson City while those trials go on and while this litigation proceeds. And it brings finality in situations. It brings the end of litigation. As I've said, it's been over 2 years since the allegations involving the reporter class, that long 5-year class. The allegations relate back to conduct that ended in December of 22. And there are, of course, Sean Williams has been convicted of a heinous crime already, and his alleged victims, I think the last one was in late 2020. So the settlement will allow the city and its citizens an opportunity to move forward if this body approves it. The amount of the settlement for both sides of the case would be a total of $28 million, which would be in part covered by your liability insurer. In order to move forward with the settlement, this body would need to approve the settlement and to appropriate the funds necessary to satisfy the settlement terms.
Mr. Lakey, excuse me, I just have a real quick question. Am I correct in understanding that as part of the proposed settlement, the plaintiffs and their counsel agree that discovery did not reveal any corruption on the part of the Johnson City Police or any officers, and that they will be dismissing these claims?
Yeah, so let me be thoughtful about how I answer it and be particular in regard to the question, because it's one of great importance to, I think, to the city and to the Johnson City Police Department as a whole and its officers, and certainly the citizens of Johnson City. Yes, if this body approves the settlement, the plaintiffs will dismiss with prejudice that portion of their lawsuit alleging that the city or the Johnson City Police Department or any of its officers were corrupt or took bribes, or that they were involved with Sean Williams in any way to traffic his victims. And more specifically to your question, in the dismissal, plaintiffs will specifically state that based on what they've learned to date, there was a substantial risk that they could not support these claims. So I think the answer to your question is yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wise?
Just to clarify, when you talk about the class of 400, you've referred to them as females. Are all of the victims females in that larger 400 potential number?
The class would be women who had reported crimes of sexual nature during that period of time, yes.
And so all of the victims of those crimes have been female?
Well, there might be a man who had reported a sexual assault during that same applicable period, but he would not be a member of this class.
I see.
That class is based solely on a gender discrimination
Thank you.
basis, and it's for women who reported crimes during that 5-year period.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Entertain a motion if there's no questions.
Mayor, and I do have some comments in a minute, but I would make a motion to approve and appropriate the funds to effectuate this settlement as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Yeah, I would second it and then with comment.
Okay.
I don't think there has been a decision I've been asked to participate in making in my time of public service that has made me feel more sick than this one does, both in terms of its consequence and its cost. But I would say we are, particularly with a class action suit, facing a serious risk, even with a strong defense. So this is a civil issue, it's not a criminal issue, and so the class action has this potential of, even if everything goes our way, except for one thing somewhere along the line, the potential cost would make a settlement seem like peanuts someday in the future. This sort of settlement is one with significant consequence, but it is not catastrophic. And what I mean by not catastrophic is the consequences of this settlement do not disrupt or threaten to disrupt ongoing core city services. And I think it's for that reason that, sick as I feel and reluctant as I am supportive of moving forward with it.
Any other comments?
First of all, Mr. Lakey, and to the entire legal team who's here tonight, thank you for helping navigate the city through, as you so pointed out, since almost 2018. This has been a long-term thing that the city has been dealing with, and on both sides, both plaintiffs and defendants. And it is my opinion we need to put this to bed and to move forward. I want to speak to our citizens. That's who we represent. And it's very important for you to know, as Commissioner Wise talked about, what is driving our decision on this. You pointed out, Mr. Lakey, the risk involved, and I think one of the most primary functions of being a city commissioner is risk management. We identify, we evaluate, we look at what risk could bring a city, and that is what we're facing tonight. We know what the cost is if we settle. It's unknown what that cost could be a year and a half from now or 2 years if it goes through the court system. And it could be extremely more than what we're looking at right here. So our job is to figure out how to mitigate that risk. And we have a proposal in front of us that I believe, can do that. This is the fault of a man named Sean Williams who did heinous things to his victims. And he is being dealt with now in the judicial system, and he will pay for his crimes. But it has been a blemish on Johnson City that he was even here among us. I want to say a couple of things to our police department. I could not have more confidence in the police team that we have today under the leadership of Chief Billy Church and Kathy, under your leadership as well. Ms. Ball came to us in late 2021 when most of all this stuff had already happened, but she stepped forward and worked very deliberately with our employees who needed the care and concern that she could deliver to them and the leadership. And Kathy, I want to say thank you to you for doing that. Lastly, also, you know, the city of Johnson City does not blame these victims whatsoever. It was Sean Williams that is to blame for all this. And so I will vote yes here in just a minute because I think it's time for us to finish this, to get it put to bed, and to move forward.
Any other comments? Before we call the roll, I'd say a few things as well. I'd echo the other commissioners that this is a difficult decision. It's been a difficult season for our city, for our police department, for our citizens, and our staff. And I understand that many, much as the person that spoke at public comment, that many of our citizens want and also deserve, you know, an explanation as to why we've come to this potential decision. But I also hope they can understand that our ability to provide that explanation is limited by court orders in this litigation, and the fact that any agreement will still ultimately have to be approved by the courts. And to echo Ms. Brock, you know, the thing that we can say is, you know, given the fact that the lawsuit has been brought as a class action and because of the sheer number of horrible crimes that Sean Williams committed, the financial risk to the city is greater than any lawsuit this city has ever seen or faced before. And so with that, I also will support this. Ms. Laus, if you'll call the roll.
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler?
The hardest vote I've made in the 8 years I've been on this, but I'm going to vote yes also.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Cox?
Yes.
Mayor Hunter?
Yes. Ms. Ball.
We have no other business on the agenda.
Okay. With that, I will adjourn the meeting.